Well, congratulations. You made it to session 9. So I know that we're committed folk here now at session 9. Maybe early on session 3 we had some stragglers, but in session 9 you've got the elect. And so welcome. We're continuing to see James walk through the idea that really the ideas of false wisdom and true wisdom. And he's going to end chapter 4 here talking about the difference between arrogance and humility and what's necessary to really walk in a posture that's pleasing to him, a posture of humility where you're acknowledging, look, I don't know everything. I've got a need to grow in some areas, and the capacity to learn from others regardless of their background or current situation. And so as we think about what it means to be fully formed followers of Jesus Christ, as we think about this pursuit that we've been on of not perfection, but just of growing in our relationship with the Lord, these concepts of arrogance versus humility are going to shape our approach to the Lord and our approach to others, either for good or for ill. So let's take a look at the last few verses of chapter 4. What James has been talking about is for the purpose of our time together today are the walls in the house. And now he's going to dive and talk about the foundation upon which those walls are built. So as we talk about humility and arrogance today, really those two things are the foundations upon which the way we live our lives actually plays itself out. And so true wisdom is built upon the foundation of humility, and false wisdom is built upon the really eroding, brittle foundation of arrogance. And so we're going to dive into and get a good look at these ideas in this text. And James is going to really, the weight of the text is really kind of a primer on the limitations of man. So you know it's going to be good. So with that said, let's look at this. James chapter 4, starting in verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. It doesn't appear that James is interested in self-esteem. 15. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing he ought to do and does not do it, sins. Now, what we see happening in this text is James is going to make some arguments concerning us as opposed to God. And his arguments are pretty simple. The first one right out of the gate is that you and I lack knowledge. And he's actually very generous in his assessment of our ignorance. He says, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. Now, there's two types of people in this, or at least as far as this illustration goes, there's two types of people. Some of us have a built out, written down plan for tomorrow, and others of us just kind of have an idea of how we want tomorrow to go. And yet, regardless of how we're wired, whether we know what time the alarm's going to come up, when our meetings are, and what time we're going to eat lunch, and how long that's going to take us to digest, and we've got all that written down and ready to roll, the truth is all of our tomorrows can be thwarted by outside factors, right? We do not know what tomorrow holds. But I think James is being generous here because if we're honest, we don't know what today holds. Like, I don't know what comes after this. I have an idea, but I don't know. Like, my plan is after this, we're going to see what the Lord does in our time together. And then I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to head home. My wife is watching babies over at the Highland Village campus, and we're going to converge upon the house. And we've got lunch plans. We've already talked about that. Here's what we're going to do for lunch. And I'm going to get there and we're going to have lunch, and the kids are going to love me. We're not going to have any discipline issues at lunch. They're just going to be glad that we're there and that we care for them. And we're going to eat lunch, and then I'm going to hang out, get a little bit of rest, and then I'm right back up here at 5 o'clock for this campus's elder-led prayer on into member meeting, and then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to get the kids to bed. And I'm going to lay in bed with them, and I'm going to encourage them, and it's going to be awesome. And I have no idea if any of that will actually happen. I don't know that I'll make it home for lunch. I mean, and I've said this to you a lot. I don't ever say it to scare you. I say it because it's reality. There isn't anyone in this room whose whole life can't change with their cell phone buzzing in their pocket right now. We're just fragile. And so James is pointing this out. He's like, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. And I'm saying he's being generous. You don't know what today will bring. And then, so in the middle of this lack of knowledge, he adds the next line. What is your life? For you are a mist. Now that word's important in this text. In the Greek, that word mist is not like a fog that lingers in the morning. It means vapor or smoke. So think not a fog on the ground for 4 hours in the morning, but think e-cigarette puff, gone. Right? Think of vapor. So James is saying, not only do you lack knowledge, but you lack power to do anything about what you do know. And so he starts to unpack this further. For you are a mist, a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes. So here's James's statement about you and about me and about all of us as created beings. We lack knowledge and we lack power to do anything about that. And so this is you, this is me. That's not a good starting point for swagger. I'm ignorant and will only be here for a second. Hear me roar, right? It's kind of a shaky start to bravado, right? It's a shaky start to bravado. Now, if you take this and compare it to what we know to be true about God in the scriptures, you see, we're even dumber than we thought. See, where James is saying you don't know what tomorrow will bring and your life is just a mist, it's just a vapor, it's just a poof of smoke. God, on the other hand, and this has been agreed upon throughout Christian history, God is omnipotent. He is all-powerful. If you watch movies, there's always kind of this dualistic tendency between God and the devil, right? It's this battle. Let's see who wins. In fact, it almost always, the deck always seems in movies to be stacked in the devil's favor, right? Like you just know, we've talked about this, that when the priest shows up in the demon movie, he's about to get worked. All right? When the priest shows up, you're not like, well, it's about to end. That's not, you're like, oh, this dude's about to get worked, because that's the way it always happens. But in the Bible, that's never how it happens. The demons never argue with Jesus. They never say no to Jesus. In fact, we see on multiple occasions demon-possessed men flinging themselves on the ground and pleading with Christ not to destroy them. That doesn't sound like a fair fight. In fact, the battle of Armageddon, the great final battle for victory, the enemies of the Lord have gathered in the garden or in the valley of Armageddon, and Christ shows up and says, I am. Boom. And it's over. It's not like, the 100-year war. That's not how this will play out. This is, I am, and it's over. He's all powerful. We also know that he's all knowing. He knows everything. He knows every detail at every level and how all of those details and events kind of form a linear history, a line of events that are all governed by his power. And so not only is he all-knowing and not only is he all-powerful, but the Bible also teaches us, and this stretches our brain, that he is everywhere at once, and everywhere he is, all of his power resides. This is where he is wholly different than you and I. So let's have some real talk between us. How many of you ever stretched yourself too thin, bit off more than you could chew? Anybody? Just been like, you know what? I wasn't as equipped for that as I thought. Man, I thought I'd be able to, right? Well, God has never felt that. God has never gone, man, got in a bit over my head in here in the Middle East. I'm in a lot of trouble right now. Let me pull back and recoup and just focus on this little part of that. No, he is as powerful and as present in the outskirts of the universe as he is in this room right now, as he is in every little crack and cranny of the universe. He is all-knowing, he is all-powerful, and he is everywhere at once. So if we're like, I don't know what today will bring, and even if I did, I can't really do much about it. If that's us, and this is God, then I want to say again, any kind of ground for boasting or swagger or self-exaltation is foolish. In fact, we are truly a people who cannot see the forest for the trees. We are truly a people who are stuck in the weeds. We cannot see the grand scheme for all the blades of grass. But God can, God does, and God is good. How do we know God is good? Because we look to the cross. And he has come to rescue and ransom us. He has come not to condemn us. And the cross is that objective evidence which lays before us on repeat that regardless of what difficulties or pain points have befallen us in this life, we can look to this all-powerful, all-knowing, everywhere at once God and trust him because we see his good work in the cross of Christ. And so this is us, this is him. But here's where I find things break down when you start talking about humility and pride and these things. They're kind of ethereal ideas. Like, what is it? Like, if you think about it, humility in and of itself is even difficult to talk about. Can you brag? Can you know that you're humble? And if you know that you are humble, are you actually humble? Right? So what are we to do with humility? Like if I ask you, hey, what's God been doing in your life? How has he been growing you? And your response is, you know what? I just feel a deep-rooted humility taking hold of my life. Like, do you though? Are you? Did you just brag about humility? Right? It's slippery. Like, how do we pursue humility? Because in the pursuit of humility, are we pursuing humility so that we might be seen as humble, so that we might be somehow exalted in our humility? You see, it's a really slippery thing. And then what do you do with the fact that arrogant, pompous blowhards don't think they're arrogant? Like they just think they're awesome. Isn't this true? Like, most people don't think they walk in pride. Most people don't think they are arrogant. They just think they're good at what they do. So how are we supposed to navigate this really kind of complex issue of humility versus pride? I'm going to give you three things, and then we'll dive back into this text and really the weight of the text. But how do we pursue humility? And I think the three things I want to point out is not only how you pursue humility, but how you also might test your heart to see if you're walking in some arrogance. So 3 ways that we pursue humility. The first is that we understand and acknowledge our weaknesses. Understand and acknowledge our weaknesses. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 14 through 20, the Apostle Paul talks about how the body of Christ works. And here's what he says. For the body does not consist of one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. So there's several things that are intrinsically built out in Paul's explanation of how the church interacts and becomes a body. Here's one of the first ones. 1, not everyone is everything. And that means every one of us has specific strengths and specific weaknesses. Some of us are eyes, some of us are ears, some of us are hands, some of us are feet, but nobody is the entire body. So the implications of that is you're gonna need some help. The implication of that is that there is a command on the Lord for us to belong to one another. You're just not gonna do well on the races as a hand. You're not gonna be able to throw anything as just a hand. You need the arm, you need the bicep, you need the shoulder, you need the core. You need these pieces. So we come together and you flank my weaknesses and I flank yours, and God puts us together for the building up of this body for the glory of his name. When you refuse to enter in, when you refuse to be a part, you weaken yourself and you weaken all of us. We know and acknowledge our weaknesses. Gosh, look at me, that should set you free. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to be everything. It's right there. You have certain gifts and certain abilities given to you by God. So you're freed up to know what you do well and to do that and not try to do all the things that you don't do well. You can let other people who are wired that way do that well. So that's how we pursue it. We want to understand and acknowledge our weaknesses. How do we know if we're already walking in pride? Well, one of two ways, and this is the insidious nature of pride. All right, the first is that you're like, I don't have any weaknesses. What are you talking about? What you need? You need me to lead something, teach something, drive something, greet something, set up something? What you need, Pastor? I got you. Right, so that would be arrogant. All right, but it also works itself out on the flip side where you feel like you're so talentless and there's nothing good inside of you that God could ever use. You feel as though your lameness somehow disqualifies you from being used by God in powerful and profound ways. Now, a couple of quick things. One, I'm not taking away from you your lameness. It's probably true. What I do want you to marvel at is that God glorifies himself by profoundly using the lame. The Apostle Paul ain't passing the background check. Hey, about this 150 people you murdered, you still struggle with that? No? Great then, work with children. Right? He what, King David? Hey, brother, you got a woman problem. You seem to sleep around a lot. Is that still a struggle? Sometimes. Okay, we're gonna have to move on. You are not gonna be the next worship pastor here, right? Like the Bible is just filled with broken, messy people, and God enters into that space and make much of his name. So arrogance is the brother who thinks he's not weak, and arrogance is the brother or sister who feels like they're so weak that God can't do anything of them. That's an accusation against God. That is an accusation that God, you are not strong enough, not powerful enough, and not good enough to use me because of my lack of perceived ability. It's foolishness. It's arrogance. So we want to be aware of our weaknesses. We don't want to hide those weaknesses. We want to acknowledge them. The second thing that I think you have to do if you want to grow in humility or spot pride in your life is you have to stay curious. You have to stay curious. What is curiosity except a playful acknowledgement that you don't know something? You ever thought about what is curiosity? It's, oh, that's interesting. I don't know about that. Let me learn about that. Right? So curiosity in and of itself is somewhat a medicine against pride. So as you grow, you must be careful of losing curiosity. Curiosity about the Lord, curiosity about other things. We must be a people that are constantly curious. Pursue and stay curious. The bent, the draw, as we grow older is to get crusty and less curious. We'll have to fight against it. We'll have to fight against it. You see this in Psalm chapter 8, starting in verse 3, when King David says this. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? So this is the ESV. The ESV is a word-for-word translation of the Bible. If you have an NIV, a New International Version, that's a phrase-by-phrase translation of the Bible. So if you've never understood why Christians have multiple Bibles, it's how the translation works. So we read the ESV here, which is a word for word. NIV is a phrase by phrase translation of the Greek. And in the NIV, it says, when I consider the work of your hand. So you've got David looking up at the stars, and he is considering, he is curious, he is blown away at the immensity of what he sees, and that curiosity has led him to marvel at the majesty and size of God, which has created in him a humility. When I think of that, what am I? When I see this, who would I be that you would love me, that you would care for me? See, curiosity is a playful acknowledgement that I don't know something. So how do you use this as a litmus test of pride and whether or not pride is there? Now, if you're not curious, but you like to weigh in even when you're ignorant, like where you always have to throw in your 2 cents when there's an expert at the table. You have a friend like this? Like just like if you're sitting down with the pilot and they're talking about kind of scary moments and cool things that have happened, and you've got that friend, or maybe you are that guy that's just like, yeah, lift and thrust. Like when I was a kid, I'd stick my hand out the window, and then, is that what it's like? That's what it's like. It's what it's like, guys. It is. You're just like, shut up. You're not a pilot. Be quiet. Let the pilot talk. Ask the pilot questions. You got a pilot here. right? And this is it. This is an inability to let someone else be an expert that reveals itself via a lack of curiosity. Will you tell me more about that? So how does this work? Well, what happens in this case? That's curiosity. That's, I don't know, this brother knows. Hey, help me understand better. That's humility. That's humility. And then lastly, and I think this is tied with the first one of like understanding and acknowledging weaknesses. It's also, you want to pursue humility, learn to acknowledge others and what they provide and how they help and serve. In Hebrews chapter 10, starting in verse 24, it says this, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." So this has been one of those themes through the book of James where we'll be able to spot and encourage the strengths of others around us, that we are experts not in how people fall short, but where they excel, where God is at work, and we tell them those things. We need one another. And so we need to learn to acknowledge and speak life into and encourage those who have shaped and molded us, who have spoken into us, who have confronted us in love, who have built us up. We need to learn to acknowledge them. So how do you use this as a litmus test? If you're always the hero and every success is simply because of your hard work, you are arrogant. I didn't put probably before that. I didn't put possibly before that. I'm telling you, if you wear the cape and everyone should just be grateful for super you, then you're arrogant and pompous, and I feel sorry for the people in your life. No way there's vitality, energy in life when you're the life-sucking black hole of praise that you are. No one is king. No one. And so if this is true, if this is how we pursue humility and how we see whether or not arrogance has taken root in our lives, how then should we live because of what James is teaching in this text? Well, there's a couple of things to consider. Like he says, I love how James starts this dialogue. He starts it with a first century, oh, come on, man. He says, "Come now, you who say." So I like that because he really is like, come on, man. Are you serious? But here's what we've got to do. Is James teaching that we shouldn't have future plans? That we shouldn't make plans, or that when we do make plans, we had better always have the little caveat of "if God wills" added to our plans? Well, we know that James is not teaching that making future plans is sinful or wrong, because the Bible views planning and preparation as a virtue. The Proverbs are filled with the wisdom of planning and executing upon a plan. So we know that planning's not sinful or wrong. So if you're a businessman and you got plans to go to Chicago and do some trading, it's not sinful for you to have that on the books. That's not what James is saying, nor is he saying that every time you ask me about a future event, I have to say, "if the Lord wills." So if we go back to the day I have today, and after service you catch me in the foyer, you're like, "Where are you heading, Chandler?" It's like, "Lunch if the Lord wills." Now I can say that every time, but this text isn't a command to add that caveat to all things. So what's happening here? Well, it's interesting. James's point is that since human plans and even our own existence in this world is somewhat insignificant and that we quickly disappear, that's all of us, we ought to take thought for larger matters having to do with faith and submission to the will of God. So that James's point is that our future plans, which are right and good, should be informed by, driven by, fueled by greater reality. So it's not like if you've got a vacation plan in July that's evil, but rather what's driving that vacation, what's driving your business, what's driving your plans that ultimately matters. That if there is a sovereign King of glory that has a mission, there is a sovereign King of glory that has created us, then who he is and what he has called us to is what drives all the areas of our lives. James's argument is our faith isn't a privatized, pulled out, separated out idea over here, but is integrated into everything we do and all that we consider and all that we set our minds and hearts to. Colossians 3, starting in verse 1, gives us a great picture of this. If then you have been raised with Christ, if I could simplify that, if you are a Christian, Seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Look at 4. 4 has a key little phrase in it. When Christ who, what? Is your life appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. So that little phrase is what James is after. When Christ, who is your life. So all of our plans, the fuel, the weight, the drive of all we're doing is Christ, who is our life. And so when I think about family vacation, I'm driven to get away and get all the hens in the nest with my girl outside of this place with all its busyness. So vacation is somewhat rest, but it's more about shaping and celebrating the original discipleship group God gave us, which is the family. I want to live financially in a very generous way because Christ is my life. I want to love my life well because Christ is my life. I want to consider my time here, how I steward my influence, what I do with my days, because Christ is my life. It's not, I've got work, I've got home, I've got my relationship with Christ. I've got my hobby, I've got my friends, I've got my passions, I've got Christ. That's not how we're to live, not how we're to consider. To have areas of our life by which the sovereign creator of all things, we say, no, this is mine. I give you your time on Sundays, is the equivalent of you saying to your spouse, it ain't date night, leave me alone. That's not how we're to live. Christ, who is my life. So all that I do is driven by this reality. Look in verse 17. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So not only in light of the pursuit of humility and the exposure of arrogance and pride, are we to make Christ our life and see all things through that lens. But now what you have here is a relentless pursuit of obedience concerning the revealed ethical will of God. Now, if that phrase is confusing, let me try to unpack it some. There are aspects of the will of God that can't be seen clearly, correct? Like let me give you an illustration. I was training as a pastor in Abilene, Texas. I was working at a church. It was a growing church. It was a young church. I was a utility back. I don't know how else to explain it, but that I was just kind of doing whatever the pastor needed. So I taught college. I trained home group leaders. I wrote the policies and procedures, which our staff would chuckle at the idea of me even having that capacity. And so whatever David needed, I would do. Tell me what to do, I'll go do it. And that's where I was training. A couple of my friends pulled into town. They're friends that I'd been doing ministry with, traveling around, doing a lot of college events and things like that. And they said, hey, why don't we start a nonprofit and move to Dallas, set it up in Dallas and operate out of there? It's easier to travel out of Dallas and we're not moving to Abilene. And so something about that resonated with my heart and resonated with my wife's heart. And so we set out to pray. And so Lauren and I began to pray, Father, is this the next step for us? Is this where you would have us go? And I looked all through the Bible, didn't find Dallas anywhere in there. I looked in the concordance, I looked through the Greek and the Hebrew, never found Dallas. My crew that I was running with was split straight down the middle. I had a group of friends, all right? They were like, why would you do that? And then my other group was like, why would you not do that? And it was numerically perfectly balanced. We have not made this move for more money because it was not more money, it was significantly less money. We have not made this move for greater platform because it wasn't a greater platform. We feel like, that's it. It was just kind of a nebulous, we feel as though you're leading us this way. We've checked counsel, we've checked the word of God, we've asked community, that there's nothing conclusive. We believe that you're leading us this way, so we're stepping out in faith. Protect us if we're wrong, because our heart has always been to serve you. Now, 15 years later, I can look at that and go, that was the will of God. But with every bit of honesty I have in me, I certainly did not know driving Interstate 20 in this direction. I was confident that the Lord would accomplish his good purposes. But gosh, there could have been wise counsel and was wise counsel going, Chandler, God has asked you to provide for your family. What if this fails? What are you going to do then? I don't know. We felt pulled. So when this is talking about obedience to the revealed ethical will, it's not talking about those kind of gray areas, but rather the crystal clear areas. And are we doing the good we know we ought to do? See, I love James's take on it. He's not saying, are you doing things you know you shouldn't do? No, it's far more evasive, it's far more aggressive than that. He said, are you doing the right things that you know you should be doing? Because if you're not doing what you know is right, that's still sin. So much of our mindset is, let me not do what's wrong. And James is going, not enough. Are you doing what you know is right? Because to not do the good you know you ought to do is sin. Now, this is a relentless pursuit of obedience to the revealed ethical will of God. Now, let's share a moment together. How many of you in this room hear that and go, well, I've got multiple things I could look back on this past week and go, there was a good I should have done and I didn't do it. I know right now, good I should have done and I didn't know. Okay, so let this be one of those things that draws us back together as a family and makes us turn our eyes and gaze upon the mercy of God made available in the cross. So one of the things I've said to you throughout the book of James is that James without the cross is a crushing book. James, no matter how old you get, will read your mail and show you your shortcomings over and over and over again. And listen to me, as awful as we think that is, it's a gift. Jesus knew what he was buying on the cross. And there's been no buyer remorse. He is not looking to return and go, hey, this one's broken. I didn't see it. It was in the box. It looked really pretty. I opened it up. Leg fell off. I don't want it anymore. He knew what he was getting. He knows it's scary to be us. He knows we stumble and bumble. He knows we're fools. He knows we don't even know what's coming later today. And he knows that our life is but a mist, but a vapor. And so he has made a way. And so the message over and over again is this: get up. I got you. Let's go. I knew this was coming. Get up. I paid for that. Yeah, you blew it. Now get back up because I've covered that with my blood. Yeah. You got confused again. Yeah. You let pride creep in again. I know I paid for that. Now get up. Let's keep going. I'll get you there. Progress, not perfection. You have my perfection while I move you through progress. Get up. Let's keep running. And in a very real way, our Savior saves us, and he sustains us, and he encourages us, and he pushes us on through the finish line of glory. And there'll be a day where we no longer wrestle. There'll be a day that pride no longer creeps in. But look at me, that day is not today. That day is not today. So all of this is good news. It might not feel like good news. You might not have a category to define this as good news. But conviction and an awareness of our arrogance is good news because it gives us the opportunity to repent of that and quit being the person who doesn't know what's coming later today, lecturing and rebelling against the one who knows all things and is everywhere at once, is in all powerful. Don't be the 2-month-old demanding that life work your way. May we be a place rooted in humility, so that true wisdom might be the walls of this house, and all the fruit of true wisdom might be born among us.